Now I'm very excited to welcome back one of our longest and most knowledgeable guests when it comes to handicapping college football to the odds breakers and Mr. Kyle Hunter from huntersportspicks.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Kyle Hunter Picks. Here we are, Kyle. Football season start. We're going to see a game this month. It's August. How was your summer, and are there any highlights?
Well, I'll tell you, it's been a good summer. I am looking forward to the fall at this point. When you get to the summer, you're always looking forward to the summer, but you get to this point, you're looking forward to football season. It's been a good summer. Took a little vacation, did a lot of remodeling around the house here. I know you've done the same thing. So, but it's nice to do that, but it's also nice to get back to some of these games. We have some of the weather will cool off a little bit. We'll see some fall. I bet you're probably looking forward to a cool off there in Arizona at this point. But
you Northerners, man, jeez, come on, come on.
I'll tell you what, it's the time of the year where it's really nose to the grindstone to find all the ins and outs of these college football teams and the NFL teams. And look, there's now 133 teams in college football, so there's a lot of work to do, and been putting it in a lot of long hours, so hopefully it pays off this year again.
Yeah, Jacksonville State, Sam Houston, I believe. Yeah, it's just keeps added up, my friend, and that's cool for me because I like the FBS more than the FCS. The FCS, you're also getting -120 on both sides in a lot of books too, so it's
don't like that.
I don't like that at all. But no, you're right. It's time, man, and I myself had a great summer, and highlight was going up to Wisconsin, but. You did some fun things too. I thought I called you when you were in Disney. Was it Disneyland or something?
No, we were at Hershey, Pennsylvania. We went to Hershey Park
Hershey
a little bit. So yeah, we had a fun time. Rode some coasters, had a good time. Ate too much chocolate, ice cream, things like that. But we're back to civilization here now, to the normal reality, and we're going to buckle down here for football season, man. It's you get that little bit of a break. I will say, baseball season can be fun, but I do get a little bit tired of only baseball. So I'm looking forward to football kicking back off.
Oh, me too. It's finally time to think about it, and I'm getting really excited. I've been doing great. I'm having a great baseball year at least, but man, I'm really itching for some football myself. And, I have to ask you this question. I've asked other people this question, but you're the most important to ask this question to. And it's really how are we going to approach the college football totals with this rule change of the clock running on first down, I believe, until 2 minutes in the halves. I've seen some books really over adjust so far.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is I don't know exactly what it's going to do to how many less plays per game. I think that you could also argue that some teams might play a little bit differently on purpose because of the new rules. So I want to see what kind of tendencies we see. I'm going to be keeping a really close eye on those week 0 games to see how many possessions there were, how many plays compared to what we saw in a lot of the games last year. However, I think rather than saying exactly how many plays less, I think there'll be I think the biggest key is for most listeners to realize that everybody is talking about how unders are going to be so easy to take at this point. The amount of times I've seen people on Twitter or X or whatever it is at this point, talking about how unders are going to be free. Here we go with the unders. Kiev, I'm an under better more than an over better. But I'm really concerned with the odds adjustments I'm seeing. I mean, some of these line moves are massive. It's not like they're not going to score any points because of this line move, because of the change. So I would be very careful about just blindly betting unders right away. I will tell you, I right away to start the season will bet less totals than I would have in a regular season, just because I think there's too much variance, too much unknown. I want to see what happens before I dive in head first, but there will be less plays per game. The odds makers have adjusted for this clearly. So let's see if there was an over adjustment or not.
Okay. All right. I agree. I almost think that the teams that were scoring a lot of points playing faster might even play even faster because they don't have that advantage, and they could score more points. And then I also think the armies and the service academies and the teams that really like to grind it out, the slow playing teams, the Iowas, they might just really capitalize on themselves and just run the clock. I think it's definitely an advantage running teams, especially when it comes to fourth quarter. A lot of stuff to think about because there's a side implication when it comes
Sure.
to that as well. So I agree. I think treading lightly is very important because we don't know what to expect, and we don't know the exact number. It should be adjusted, and there's nothing like college football, but we'll be paying attention quickly because we will be adjusting. So great stuff, Kyle. I know you will be, being that you're so great at totals. Well, let's talk a little bit about the ACC, man. Interesting. It's nice to see the ACC is not like they're like sitting there in the cut, a little quiet. You got the Pac-12 demise, you got the Big 12 losing some people, the Big 10's gaining, the SEC's gain, all that, and the ACC's just kind of hanging out there. Nothing's really changing. I kind of like that, but at the same time, when I prepped for this podcast over the weekend, I was like, man, there's a lot of teams here. This is not ending. But what's the biggest change so far in the ACC?
I mean, they're not doing the divisions where they're going to play Coastal versus what was the other one called, Atlantic or something.
Yep.
These are just going to be the 1 versus 2 teams when you get to the playoff game or the title game here for the conference, which I do like. I think it'll be nice. We've had some years where one team in the one division really didn't deserve to be there compared to some of the other teams. I think it sets up for a more competitive game there in the ACC championship. So I'm looking forward to that. I know there's been some talk, Kiev, and we won't get into this because we would take far too long if we did. But I know there's been some talk about what Florida State's going to do in the future, whether they're going to stay in the ACC. I sound like an old head when I say this, but there's almost too much change here for me of late. So I agree with you. I like the ones that have kind of stayed the same. Hopefully the ACC can hold on here at least for a while.
Yeah, it is what it is. It's not going to stop us from betting, but I mean, I don't want too much conference power to where they break off to their own league. I don't want to see something like that because that could happen if they're not getting in the playoffs, and the SEC could be bitter about some stuff. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I like a chance for everybody. Myself, I love the size of it, and they just got to at least keep the size with whatever they're doing. So I totally agree with you. I'm a little bit of an old head myself, my friend. I'm older than you, Kyle, but I definitely know that you're an old head. Whenever I talk, you're mature past your ears, your years, not your ears, my friend. So that's why I always thought of you, and especially when I first started listening to you way back in the day in 2013. But we have a question actually. David is asking about Drake May, and I think UNC is a great place to start here. Why not? Drake May's full of hype coming into the season. He is. I mean, his Heisman odds are probably in the single digits, maybe 8-1, 10-1. I have to relook at them, but they're definitely not value. What kind of outcome can we see for UNC? How many wins do you think they can have? He has. So I'll introduce the North Carolina Tar Heels here, coming on in. I think that North Carolina obviously lost a very important offensive coordinator to one of my favorite teams behind me, as as in the Wisconsin Badgers. I'm excited for it, but I'm still a little apprehensive to see how the heck this is actually going to look. Yeah, it's a massive change, and we'll see. I think I rate their 3-year recruiting, their average from 2020 to 2022. I have average of 13, which is very high. I mean, anything averaging up there is quite high because you have your bad years and good years. Returning production ranked 43, 69% on the offense, 58% of the defense. Transfer portal rankings on 247 was 29th. Net yards per play was only 0.13. 2022 strength of schedule was 49th. This year it's ranked 57th. Their win total is at 8, Kyle. So I'm going to see what you have to say about Drake May and the Tar Heels.
Well, I mean, I've got nothing negative to say about Drake May. He's going to be a superstar again, and he'll be a good NFL player, certainly. My concern is Chip Lindsey comes in as the offensive coordinator. I'm not high on Chip Lindsey in general. He's I didn't do a good job with the Troy program when he was there. You saw how much better Troy got when they got rid of him and then bring in the new coach. You hope he doesn't ruin the offense because things were going great with the offense. We don't need a big change here. The other thing is, Kiev, the defense for North Carolina, I mean, can they stop anybody? It got ridiculous last year how bad the defense was. Yeah. That team benefited from turnovers and winning a lot of close games. In general, I would want to bet a season win total under for North Carolina. I know there's some 8.5s out there. I would definitely want to get that 8.5. And because I bet season win total so much, I do think it's important to point out that those half a win, those are worth a lot when it comes to season win totals, probably 65, 75 cents, somewhere in that range. So you don't want to get caught not getting the half win on something like a season win total. So definitely shop around on those. I would say defensive line for me is such a problem for North Carolina. It just really concerns me. They had 17 sacks last year, 4.5 yards per carry allowed. The talent seems to be pretty good there every year, and yet they can't stop anybody. So, are they going to be able to do that this year? I don't want to count on it. I also would think that this is a team that we want to watch the tempo for, because what's North Carolina going to do under Chip Lindsey, compared to what they've had the last few seasons? They might play a little bit slower. Those total numbers are going to be very high for this team. So I would be cautious about those early on.
Oh, for sure. And May's coming in with a lot of hype, but also a target on his back now. As you know, their teams are not sleeping on him this year. They got some wide receivers in the transfer portal. They got a guy from UCF, probably came with Chip Lindsey, I believe. A couple other guys, I think, from, I want to say, maybe from Kent State and Georgia Tech. I'm pretty sure. I have to relook at it. But I have them at 7.5 wins. They have a hard schedule on the non-conference because Appalachian State is no pushover, and they're close by. They're going to want to win the game. South Carolina is on a neutral site. It's not like Minnesota. I mean, they have to play Minnesota this year. It's not that easy group of 5 bottom barrel strength of schedule this year, Kyle. And I really strongly lean to the under here and fading all this hype with May. I know May's good, but man, this defense was, I think, last in points scored in the ACC last year. And I think they were last in total yards as well, Kyle. So David, I'm looking towards the under here. I didn't make the play yet, but find an 8.5 and it will be one.
Yeah, under is definitely my pretty strong lean here. The other thing is that App State game. Remember the 63-61 final where North Carolina won? I don't remember how many overtimes it went in, but that was a wacky game where App State has plenty of reason to really want them back for a game like that. I think North Carolina is a team that won some games they probably shouldn't have won last year, so I'd be cautious there.
Yeah, absolutely. And they did get Nate McCullum from Georgia Tech for wide receiver and Tez Walker from Kent State. So my memory did serve me right. I just couldn't remember the names, Kyle. I'm not a great names guy, so I always have to check my notes, but it's okay. Let's move on to Clemson then. Why don't we kind of start with the team, or go to the team that's been on top of the ACC for so long. Clemson, interesting because they've faltered a little bit after Venables has been gone. Obviously, the defense maybe took I don't even know if they really took a step back. I thought that defense was pretty solid last year, but Clemson's a team that I kind of like. I'm not going to lie. Their 3-year recruiting is at 6. The returning production is 36, 64% on offense, 75% on defense. Their transfer portal rankings is terrible at 101. And they just don't do that. They're not like an NIL program. They don't want to be. I think they need to be in the future. But their yards per play was only 0.57. 2022 strength of schedule was at 101. This year is at 40th. Their win total is 10. Cade Klubnik, Kyle, does he have what it takes to put these guys back in the playoffs?
I mean, that's $1 million question right there. There's a lot on his shoulders, and the Clemson defense is excellent. I think the front 7, Kiev, is as good as anybody outside of maybe Georgia. I mean, and even that's questionable. And if you're being talked about with Georgia, then you're doing something right there. The secondary was a little bit weaker last year, gave up some big plays in the secondary. I think they're probably going to be better than they were last year. Probably a team that I know in Phil Steele's rankings went from 8th to 38th in pass defense. I would expect them to go back up in the top 15 or 20 this year. Offensively, their running backs are really good. Shipley's underrated. Maffa's a good backup. The question mark is, in the new offense under Garrett Riley. Garrett Riley was a good hire. I don't think anybody doubts that. Is it going to happen right away? I think this is a really big season for Clemson because they went 11-3 last year, and yet it still seemed like kind of a down season for Clemson. We know that, in the past they were seen as a national title team. They weren't very close to that last year. I think this is a really big year for them. Like you said, they haven't been very good in the NIL era. If they don't bounce back a bit this year, it would concern me for their long-term path or projections going forward. But I like their hires as far as coordinators. And I think the upside is there, Kiev. And rather than betting a season win total over, I think I'd rather bet something like them to reach the playoffs, or even take a flyer on them to win the national titles that you could hedge out if they do get to the playoffs. I think they're a team that they could be really, really good, and it wouldn't surprise me. They could struggle a bit, and it wouldn't shock me. So because of the variance, I'd rather bet the future than I would the season win total.
No, I agree. And that's actually what I did go. I took a future on them that they make the playoffs at 3.5 to 1. And it's a slight slap to Florida State, I guess. But, it's Clemson and Charleston Southern. They get in the non-conference, Florida Atlantic, which is a little harder this year. And I really can't wait to get into the American Athletic Conference and how they're moving and everything and all the changes that's been happening. I've blown off the group of 5 a little bit, but I'm just about there. I've done a little work. Notre Dame's always tricky, but they get Notre Dame at home. I like how they got Notre Dame at home, North Carolina at home, and Wake Forest at home, Florida State at home. The tougher ones, I guess, would be the first game at Duke. I expect them to win that game, and at Miami. But Miami, they were bad last year, man. I hope for Miami's sake that they can do something. That South Carolina's at the very end. That's a little bit of that rivalry game there. But Cade Klubnik is much better than DJ Uiagalelei, in my opinion. I think that their weakness was the offense, like you said. They lost the coordinators on both sides of the ball the last 2 years, but they returned 4 starting linemen. They returned some starting wide receivers. Shipley, I just think that it's time for them to kind of get back into it, and people are just looking past them a little bit too much. They kind of lost the hype. I like buying on teams that are very talented, like Cade Klubnik and some of their guys they've been recruiting, ranking 6 over those 3-year span. I think that they can make the playoffs. I'm not going to bet them to win the ACC, but if they win the ACC and they have that 1 loss or no losses, Kyle, they'd almost have to be in the playoffs. So that's where I'm liking them.
Yeah, I agree. I like that bet. Michael, thanks for chiming in with somehow the world seems a bit more normal with seeing Kyle and Kiev talking college football. It does feel great. And I agree with his thought here. It seems like there's about 1 of 8 teams that could join Georgia in the playoffs. I think Clemson's one of them. So you got several teams with that high upside potential. Clemson's one of them. I like Kiev's bet there for them to reach the playoffs.
Yeah, thank you, Mike Lacera. I believe that you how to pronounce your last name. So, yeah, I really think that Clemson is the one overlooked, and you're right. You got Michigan, obviously, always there. Ohio State's always there. Georgia, Bama, Clemson's always there. But then you got to throw in USC. You maybe even Oregon, right? You got to throw in a couple of those teams. They return their quarterbacks. Texas, of course, and everybody's talking about Texas. They do it every year, but there's a legit reason, though, because Texas has everybody and all the talent. Just got to get that quarterback, him in his right mind. If he was just consistent last year, he'd be great. Let's move on to the next team, and let's go to Florida State, man. Why not? And Florida State was fantastic last year. Their average 3-year recruiting 21.66. Returning production rank was first. Oh, yeah, first. That's a lot of 80% on offense, 94% on defense. Transfer portal rankings 5th. Net yards per play 2.11. 2022 strength of schedule is 24th. Strength of schedule this year is 45th. Win total is 10, though. I mean, I wrote the sky's the limit with them, really. Returns the most production, but once again, they're not going to be sneaking up on anybody. Jordan Travis was amazing, 64%, 24 touchdowns thrown. I love the fact that these guys did great in the transfer portal, but the big loss on defense was safety Jamie Robinson. They returned some of their other secondaries and their starting linebackers. I think that's huge, but they have to go to Clemson, and I always have to do that. There's 2 main hurdles with them. They're starting off at LSU or against LSU. I think it might be a neutral site, Kyle. I have to relook at that. Yeah, and then they have to go to Clemson. That is 2 very difficult games. I would definitely put LSU better than Notre Dame, and that's where Clemson's got to play. So I think it's just a little bit more hurdles. Their strength of schedule is going to be a little bit difficult. What are your thoughts?
I think another tricky game on that is the at Pitt game. I think Pitt's a pretty good team. Playing on the road there is not going to be very easy. I tell you, I think the returning starters is great. Florida State played so well last year. They yards per play margin, they look like they could have been even better than what they were. I think it is interesting you said about the recruiting rankings. Florida State still isn't up there with those top 5 or 6 teams when it comes to recruiting rankings. That would make me a bit cautious about betting them to win a title because I'm not sure they can beat the best from some of the other teams throughout the country. I think they're a consistently very good team, and I think that their floor is very high. This is a team that's going to win a lot of games no matter what, barring some ridiculous injury luck or something. To me, 10 is awfully high if you're going to bet an over for a season win total here. I can't bet over. Do I really want to bet the under? No, I'm not going to bet anything on Florida State. I do think that Florida State 8-5 ATS last year. They're not going to sneak up on anybody, like you said. They're very highly rated. In my notes, I basically said this is a team that I want to wait and see what's going on. I don't want to fire away right away on this team because perception is so high. They are a very good team.
They are, absolutely, and I agree with you. If they were playing at home against Clemson, I might have made the bet on them, but that's just a big flip for me. I think that I have them power rated, Kyle, pretty close to each other. I have Florida State upgraded to 17.5 points better than the average team, and I have Clemson right there at 17.5 as well. I mean, literally neck and neck here, but the fact that I got a little bit better number on Clemson was nice. So that's the reason I made it that way. But I think the ACC could sneak someone in for sure. Let's move on to another one. This is an interesting one. Duke, Kyle, because Duke is that team that really overachieved last year. I mean, blows your mind how they got to so many wins. Where they win 8 games, 9 games? I think 9. Man. Yeah, they won 9 total games last year. They don't recruit well. I mean, average recruiting is 56.66. Returning production ranks 33rd, 82% on offense, 60% on defense. Transfer portal rankings was only 57th. Net yards per play, 0.59. 2022 strength schedule was 74. Strength schedule this year's 49th, but I believe it's actually harder than that, in my opinion, from a total. Win total is only 6.5, though. So, yes, Duke at 6.5. And this feels so public for people to want to go over on this. But one thing I will say about Duke is that they were terrible against the pass. They ranked 12th in the ACC against the pass, 150 or 105th in defensive pass EPA. I mean, if they can fix that, they can be very dangerous. But they have Clemson at Florida State, at North Carolina, versus Notre Dame, and more. I mean, this is a brutal schedule. This is why you're seeing it at 6.5. I mean, I like Riley Leonard. I just can't see Mike Elko's team doing it.
This is the tough one because I like Elko a lot, like Leonard a lot. As a program, I think that they're doing a very good job, still pointing in the wrong way, in the right way. And I do think that Duke is probably better than they were last year, but it's not going to show on the wins and losses. Sometimes we have these teams where if you go back and look at who Duke beat last year too, they didn't really beat the really good teams they played. They didn't really play a tough schedule at all last year, a much, much tougher strength of schedule this year than what they had last year. Just go through there. They play Clemson to start. Notre Dame at Duke is obviously a tough game. At Florida State, at Louisville, who's going to be good as well. At UNC, Pittsburgh at Duke will be a tough game. I think Duke is a better team than last year. I think Riley Leonard is a top 15 or 20 quarterback in the country. And yet I can't bet over 6.5. It feels too easy, public wise to bet over 6.5. I think this team is a good team. They also went 10-3 against the spread last year. So they're not sneaking up on anybody as far as the odds makers either this season. So a better team, tougher schedule, maybe some unders. I think Elko's a coach who will help the defense over time with his defensive mind. So maybe some totals under the total, betting the single games here.
Yeah, no disagreement there. Look to the under, and I think I want Duke to win one of those games that I just rattled off. Maybe it's Florida State, maybe it's Clemson. I want them to win one of them. So maybe it's UNC. That's a big rivalry right there. So let's see it. But speaking about what you just said about Louisville's going to be good this year. That's interesting, Kyle. A lot of changes with Louisville. So I'm going to let you get started on Louisville.
Well, I think Louisville's going to be good this year. I do think the season win total is tough. I mean, what is it, 8.5, 8 or 8.5, depending on the book. So, uh, pretty
I have
high win total.
actually. Wait a minute. I found it at 6, but I'm gonna double check this on Betfred Sports to see if it's still there. So you go ahead.
Wow, maybe that's a lot different than what I've seen. So,
No, no, no. I wrote it wrong. It is 8.5, but to the under minus 150. So it's more like 8.1,
yeah.
8.2. Yeah, go ahead.
Kiev, I was about to go bet over 6 there. So I was about to open the tab there and go right to bet over 6. I think 8.5 is pretty high. Braum, he comes back to Louisville. This is a great story. I think Braum did a great job with Purdue. Um, Everybody has to like this hire. What are they going to do right away? It's going to be a drastic change from the system that they've been in the last few years. And Kiev, if we're going to talk about totals and what scheme changes are going to look like, Louisville's about as drastic as you'll get. Their defense was excellent last year. You look at their defensive stats, they were far better than anybody expected. Offensively, they were disappointing. I would expect their defense to regress, definitely get worse this year. And I think their offense gets a decent amount better. So let's see what their totals are early on. I would definitely consider betting overs with them. I also think Louisville will be bad against the run. They lost a lot of talent on the defensive line. So I think the defensive line is going to be a weakness. Plummer has been with Braum in the past, so I think he'll know the system pretty well as the quarterback. I tend to think that Louisville is going to be a pretty good team, but 8.5 is a lot of wins. I can't take over 8.5.
Okay, I wrote it down wrong, but I had 7 as the win, so I wasn't going to go over. I probably was thinking 8.5 when I did write it, or 8. But I'm going to lean to the under for sure on this one. I think that, I like Jeff Brom and what he does. And the Big Ten, you have to remember the dude never passed. I mean, I can't remember when they weren't top 5 in passing attempts, Kyle, over the last 5 or 6 seasons. I look back 5 seasons, and this team, minus COVID year, when obviously they didn't have as many games, was top 5 in passing attempts. Jack Plummer is Jack Plummer. I mean, he tried to have some upside. Where was he last year? At Texas A&M, where it was I can't remember what school he was at last year, but yeah, he faltered. And yeah, it was Cal. And he was, he definitely wasn't that good in that system. And Jeff Brom's system is very pass friendly and pass heavy. But when you look at a year where they're kind of hurting the pass a little bit, not stopping that clock on first down, I think it does hurt Jeff Brom teams. And yeah, it makes me really think about this 8.5 win total. I know that Murray State should be an easy win. Indiana should be a win. I mean, Indiana knows Jeff Brom and he knows Indiana. So I wonder how that's going to work out. I expect them to win that game, but I just think of no defense all the time. And their defense was good last year, but they also played pretty slow. Now, no Malik Cunningham. It's a massive change for the kids playing around him, and they're going to have to learn a new system right away. Notre Dame's going to be very tough. Kentucky is on their schedule. They do avoid Clemson at least, and they avoid Florida State. So that's good. But 8.5 is high for a new team. I think 8 would be their ceiling. So I'll even make a play on this after this. I'll make a play under 8.5. It's minus 150. I'll just throw a half a unit on there, Kyle. I feel strongly about that.
I'm going to think about that one too, Kiev. I haven't placed all my bets on season win totals, but that's one that I'm considering. I think Louisville's a good team. I just think the expectations here are super high right away.
Yeah, 100%. Well, good. Glad we're on the same page. Let's move on to another team. And we can really pick because there's no Coastal and Atlantic anymore. Why don't you go to Miami? Let's talk about Miami, the U. And man, was this team disappointing last year? I'm going to find my notes real quick. I mean, Mario Cristobal had the honeymoon year last year, the classic honeymoon year. But I mean, being negative 0.58 in yards per play, when this team is recruiting high, 14.66 is recruiting. They return a decent amount of production, 35th in returning production, 62% on offense, 77% on defense. Their schedule is 68th last year, ranked 65th this year in power. Their win total 7.5. I just think that I'm worried about this Miami team. The honeymoon is over, like I said. I don't know how they could have been this bad with the way they recruited. It makes no sense to me. They fired their offensive coordinator, Josh Gaddis. They brought in Sean Dawson from Houston. That's a Dana Holgerson kind of guy, a guy that learned from Dana Holgerson. It's going to be more of an air raid style offense, but that always takes some adjustment time. I didn't bet anything, but I'm going to lean in the under.
Kiev, I tell you, Mario Cristobal has gotten a lot of love in past years. I've always thought he was a bit overrated. Now, obviously, he's probably a little less overrated now than he was in the past because they just went 2-10 against the spread last year. But he's 54-72 against the spread all time. So he's been burning money here for a while, and it wasn't just last year. He recruits well. I don't know that he does that well with the team after he has them there. I think, I think that Miami got too much of a pass from some people last year. I know they had injuries. I get that, on the Bet US college football show, I was talking about Miami, and there were a lot of those Hurricanes fans got in the comments like, you don't realize they got injured. You don't realize blah, blah, blah. Look, Kiev, they had recruited so well that even with those injuries, to have that kind of season is pretty I just think that you can't give them a pass for something like that. 5-7, 2-10 against the spread. Some of those losses, it looked like they were just giving up. You can't do that. I think they'll be better this year. How could they be worse? Having said that, do I really want to trust them to bet over 7.5? I do not. Somebody else can go ahead and do that. I think Tyler Van Dyke, if he stays healthy, can be pretty good here. The defense has enough talent. They were 102nd, Kiev, in total QBR allowed last year. That's just horrible. How could the secondary be that bad? Remember when Middle Tennessee State was just chewing them up and spitting them out? I'm probably going to get some Miami fans hating on us here, but I don't hate Miami. I just don't know how they were that bad. I think that they should be so much better. If they can't bounce back this year, I'm really concerned about their future.
They ranked 7th in the transfer portal. They need to build this team back. And I find it really funny that the most disappointing teams played each other last year, Texas A&M versus Miami, but they're going to play each other again this year, Texas A&M hosting Miami. And that makes their schedule a little harder. They should be Bethune Cookman and Temple looking on the non-conference, but at Florida State, at NC State, at North Carolina, that's pretty hard. There's 4 probable losses right there. And then Clemson at home. I'd almost rather play Clemson on the road and just chalk that out as a loss here. Yeah. Tyler Van Dyke was a bit injured last year, but I don't know. I've definitely felt that I overrated him coming into last year after seeing what he did. I thought he was really frustrated. Maybe this is all Josh Gaddis's bad offense, but I don't know. I can't. There's no chance in heck I would bet the over with Miami. So I'm in it with you. And funny, I upgraded a lot in my power ratings because I had them so low last year. They're in the negatives. I have them as kind of average ACC team, but that's the only way I could start them because of their transfer portal ranking power. I had to add that up, So
right.
Just one of those situations. Let's move to NC State. NC State was pretty good last year. I believe they won 6 or 7 games, 8 games. They won 8 games last year. Then they lost that bowl game against Maryland. It was one of those weird 16-12 games. And it was a Duke's Mayo Bowl, as a matter of fact. So NC State, Dave Doran, obviously a coach that has definitely proved people wrong when he comes in as a dog. I'll let you start on this one, Kyle.
Yeah, NC State was hyped so much last year. Remember Kiev going into the season, people like NC State, this is their year to knock off the top teams. They went 4-9 against the spread last year, even though they were 8-5 straight up. So they underachieved. I know they had some injuries on defense as well. I think the biggest key about this team is they bring in a new offensive coordinator in Robert Ernai. I think they'll play faster than they have been, Kiev. I kind of think overs could have some value with NC State. Now, I still think their defense is good, especially linebackers. Peyton Wilson's a star linebacker. I think Brennan Armstrong coming in as quarterback is good. Brennan Armstrong was absolutely hosed last year at Virginia. If you look at some of the dropped passes stats and what Elliott did to that offense there at Virginia, it was just terrible. I think Brennan Armstrong is far better than he looked last season. So I like him coming in. I think that NC State, as long as they get decent offensive line play, and that is a bit of a question mark here. As long as they get decent offensive line play, I think overs here could have some value. I would expect them to play faster.
Yeah, I would too. Dave Duran has always been good when he was doubted. And he wasn't good as a favorite last year coming in, but this team was a disgusting minus 0.15 net yards per play. They never recruit good. They're only ranked 47.66 3-year recruiting, 98th in returning production. But returning production is really based upon their quarterback, Devin Leary. Is Devin Leary was he an upgrade over Brendan Robinson, or is Brendan? I should say Armstrong, not Robinson. Is Brendan Armstrong a downgrade from him? I've seen him really good like 2 years ago. I think so. I think he's a little bit of a downgrade, but it's hard to tell. I hate going against Duran. He really shocks you when you least expect it. These kids knew that they were supposed to be good last year and they weren't. That could motivate them. I think the win total is great at 6.5. I think it's fine. I think it's a good win total.
Yep, I think nothing here on the win total or future. I just want to look to see to maybe bet some overs with this team through the year.
All right, let's move to Pitt then, Kyle. Pitt is in a situation themselves where they have a new quarterback coming in, Phil Jurkovec. And some people call him Jurkovec. I never know what to say, but this is definitely a big change when he's coming in from Boston College. Lifetime transfer guy. So here's your thoughts on Pitt.
I think Pitt's good. I like this team in general. I tend to think that, I'll be honest, I wish I had bet this win total when it first came out, Kiev. 6.5 was a good over bet. 7 pretty much across the board now, or 6.5, minus 200. But, I don't like to lay minus 200. And I think Pitt, they're always good defensively. They have that offensive coordinator in Signetti who likes to run the football, play slower. I have no idea if it's Jurkovec or whatever, like you said. I've been corrected multiple times different ways, so I don't know what it is. But Phil is a good quarterback, and I think he is an upgrade at quarterback probably. Slovis didn't play great in this system. As far as the running backs, they're always pretty good. Narduzzi teams can run the football pretty well. The offensive line is good. The defensive line at Pitt is good every single year, Kiev. They lose a bunch of guys every year, and people say maybe they won't be very good. Then they get, 40, 45 or 50 sacks again. So I assume they're going to be very good because that's what we've seen out of them. This is a defensive backfield that's not great. So I think the secondary would be their weakness. Special teams wise too, I think we should say special teams wise, Pitt is amazing. They have a great punter. They're going to win some games because their special teams are so good. So in general, I tend to like Pitt better than the market, I believe. I haven't bet an over here on a win total. That would be my lean.
I can't believe how much this team has lost to the NFL over the past 2 years. I mean, obviously their quarterback went to Pittsburgh, the Steelers 2 years ago, and they lost a lot of guys. It's just so weird. How do you keep finding these guys when their recruiting ranks 49.66? Their returning production is terrible, 119th. I am a big Narduzzi guy, but I'm not a big Jurkovec guy. I know he was at Boston College, and he kind of shined for a minute on Notre Dame when there was an injury, but I don't know what to think about him. I hate going against Narduzzi. This kind of feels like the same NC State type situation where I don't want to go against it, yet my number's a little bit lower. My number's 6.5. I had to downgrade him a bit in the power ratings because of all the guys they did lose to the NFL, and some of those guys were high draft picks. And Kalaja Kancey, wasn't he like first round or second round pick? And they were just great. And on defense, their pass rush was amazing, if you remember. And I think that they have to take a step back, but I've been wrong about them before. My power rating on them is right close to Miami's, around 6. So I'm going to keep them there. And this is kind of that year that I'm not going to jump into a lot of plays in the beginning either, Kyle. I'm going to kind of wait it out. I'm not chasing any lines, thinking that there's going to be movement in one way or the other, unless I'm really sure about something. I think that's just a good way to approach the season in general. So no disagreement really there. I just don't like the fact that they lost so much to the NFL. But let's talk about another overrated team last year. And they're overrated because we They started out with 6 wins in a row or something. Syracuse, that was absolutely ridiculous. And you do give credit to Schrader. I thought Schrader did good, and I thought that they did get some injuries. But it's funny, you look at their wins last year, 6 in a row, then they lose 5 in a row. The season's almost over. Then they get that one win against Boston College, and then they lose to Minnesota in the bowl game. So I found that Syracuse is a very interesting situation. If you're smart enough to see they were overrated and just started fading them after Clemson, then you had an opportunity because, after Clemson, I bet a lot of people were on them against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame beats them by 15 points, covers their spread pretty easily. But Syracuse, I think they take a slight step down this year. I think they're not shocking anybody when they come in. The recruiting is only ranked 61st for 3 years. They do return a lot of guys, 24th in returning production, 73% of offense, 72% in defense. Transfer portal rankings only 63rd. Their net yards per play was nice at 1.08. 2022 schedule ranked 41st. This year's ranks 69th. Their win total is 6.5, but my number is 5.5. I think that ever since Clemson, they lost it. Kyle, any thoughts?
I'll be quick on this one, but I think Syracuse is probably overvalued a bit. The one thing I like about Syracuse is they bring in Rocky Long as the defensive coordinator. Rocky Long is a really good defensive coordinator. So I would tend to think that their offense takes a step back, definitely down without Tucker at running back. That's a big loss. I think their defense could be pretty solid, at least by the end of the year, switching to the 3-3-5 and playing under Rocky Long there. So unders, if they continue to play at a slow tempo, they didn't play very fast last year. I'll look for unders here with Syracuse.
Yeah, this team used to play fast.
Yeah,
a few years ago. This was a big change. Schrader is a gamer, I will say. The dude really plays out the full fourth quarter. When he's in the game, you expect him to score and go ahead of the next team. Maybe a good live betting team if they're really fighting hard like they did last year. So I did like them about that, but they were really net negative in the transfer portal. A lot of the guys left. I wonder what's going on with Dino Babers. I think last year, the fact they made a bowl game and everything saved their season, but man, I am seriously concerned again for them, and maybe Garrett Schrader can work some magic again. We'll see. Georgia Tech, that's the team I want to go to because I have a play on this one, but I'm going to let you go first, Kyle.
Yeah, Georgia Tech, I don't have a play on this one, so I'm curious to see what your play is here. They play hard for Key. I think they're a team that doesn't have the same kind of talent that the teams around them do. This is a team that I'm pretty neutral on, so I think Georgia Tech is, we'll find out quite a bit about them the first couple weeks of the year. They have some interesting games right away. We find out about them. I think Georgia Tech making the switch at quarterback is going to be interesting, where Sims went to Nebraska. Let's see how they look without him. To me, Georgia Tech's a team that's going to play hard. I'd probably bet them as an underdog in some spots because I don't think they quit. They were 6-6 against the spread last year. New offensive coordinator this year. They can't run the ball very well. Is Haynes King going to be good for Georgia Tech? I don't know. What's your play here, Kiev?
I'm going under, my friend, under 4.5. Just telling you right off the get-go here, I'll put a full star on there, a full unit. Georgia Tech, they got those 5 wins last year, but don't be fooled by those returning production numbers you see, because a lot of times they're not accurate. Sims did leave, and I thought Jeff Sims won them those games. I thought he's a pretty solid quarterback, and Haynes King isn't. Haynes King is not a solid quarterback, and if you can't get the starting job at Texas A&M with how bad that offense is, then this is definitely a downgrade. They also lost defensive end Keon White to the NFL draft and 2 linebackers to graduation that were good, top tacklers. Here's the weird thing about this team. They hired Georgia's quality control assistant, Buster Faulkner, as their offensive coordinator. That just sounds like you're reaching. It's almost like you went to the quarterback coach and offered him a job, but he's like, no, that's okay. Let's go to the kid that's their intern and hire him as offense coordinator. I don't know. Maybe Buster Faulkner is good, but it just sounds strange. Sometimes certain systems are good with talent, like Georgia, but that doesn't mean that system's going to work in a small school. And I wouldn't call them small school. It's just that they're not Ohio State. They're not Michigan, not Georgia. They're not, Clemson. they have to play with the talent that they have. I mean, Wisconsin had to do that, and they ran the ball forever, and it worked. It worked to beat all the other teams except for the good ones, and I've seen it happen before. But this is going to be rough. They should definitely beat South Carolina State, but then they got at Ole Miss. I mean, that's a loss. At Wake Forest, I have to assume a loss. They should win Bowling Green. Then at Miami, Boston College is a toss-up. North Carolina, probably a loss. At Virginia, toss-up at best. But then at Clemson, Syracuse, and Georgia. They actually get Georgia this year. So I say 4 wins is their ceiling. So I went under, Kyle.
All right, that makes sense. I think I'm going to pass on this one, but I can understand where you're coming from.
All right. Well, we covered everything but the Virginias, really, and Wake Forest. Why don't you pick Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, or Virginia?
Let me say Wake Forest and Virginia Tech both really quick. I think Clawson's a really good coach. I just looked this up, Kiev. He's 91-71 against the spread all time as a coach. I think this is a big test for them. Wake Forest probably could be a good team as an underdog here at some point this year. They might improve throughout the course of the season. Obviously, big loss without Hartman. I don't want to bet a season win total on them, but I think they could be good to bet on at some point throughout the season. Virginia Tech under 5.5, I do like pretty well. I think Virginia Tech's offensive line holds them back badly. I don't like the path that they're taking right now. If you look at some of their numbers, the offensive line has just been crushing them. 3.14 yards per carry last year. The depth is really bad. They might be the worst offensive line in the ACC, maybe Virginia, but Virginia is about worst in about everything, right? So Virginia Tech, drones or Grant Wells is the quarterback. Grant Wells wasn't very good here. He wasn't great at Marshall, and obviously the step up to Virginia Tech was too much. So I don't trust Virginia Tech. They no longer even have that dominant defense. So I think Virginia Tech under 5.5 is a good bet.
Oh, there you go. Virginia Tech under 5.5. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think I have these teams pretty bad, and Virginia is their win total 3.5. And I think Virginia's strength of schedule is actually really tough here. They got to play Tennessee. They got to play James Madison, who was really good coming in last year from the SCS, right? Then at Maryland. That's 3 non-conference losses, and then you got the ACC. Maybe you win. You'll win against William and Mary. God, I hope so. But man, everything else is going to be difficult for Virginia. And then they get Virginia Tech at home at the very end, but that's not even as much of a home game as with the big rivalry there. And the Hoosiers ranked 113th or worse in passing offense, passing defense, and rushing offense. I mean, they're bad. And in Virginia Tech, I got to tell you, 19.3 points per game is what they're scoring. Grant Wells. He's going to be pushed by Baylor transfer Kerryon Jones, but I wonder if that actually comes to fruition for Jones. They did get some wide receiver help in the transfer portal, and Brett Pry is going to have his hands full on defense. So I have these as the 2 worst teams for sure, Virginia and Virginia Tech, Kyle.
Yeah, I could never take a Virginia over either. It's hard to take under 3.5, so I don't know that I'll bet that, but Virginia is very weak as well.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Well, anything else in the college football spectrum?
I mean, let's look at some more of these season win totals. I want to give a quick shout out to the fact that I'm doing the season win total charity project. If you haven't already donated to that or look to see on my Twitter feed, you can see that as the pinned post. I've had a lot of people donate already. It's a great cause, and it's pretty cool to raise several $1,000s and give out those season win total plays. Let's see if we can have another good year. Last year was 12-3 on those, so hoping for another good season with those.
That's amazing. Awesome stuff. And you had like the best college football season I've ever seen last year. It was absolutely ridiculous. I think you're 70% or something ridiculous.
57-24. I'll be the first to say I can't do that every year, but it's been 2 really good years in a row. So I'm putting in the work to try to make it another good year, Kiev.
That is wonderful. Make sure you check out Kyle Hunter Picks. Check out the Odds Breakers if you'd like one of his packages. Kyle, thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot, Kiev.